My daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, your heart simply cannot handle the pressure of the flight. Just stay here and make sure the grass does not die." 2 weeks later, she returned from her luxury vacation in Hawaii to find a vacant lot where her future inheritance used to be. I was sipping a vintage red wine in Rome when I saw her 55th missed call light up my phone screen. If you have ever been underestimated by the very people you raised, hit like and subscribe right now. My name is Garrison Ford. I am 72 years old, and this is how I taught my ungrateful children that the man who built the foundation can also trigger the demolition. The morning air in Seattle was crisp, carrying that familiar scent of pine and damp earth from Lake Washington. It was the kind of morning I usually spent drinking black coffee on the deck, admiring the house I had built with my own 2 hands 30 years ago. But today, the driveway was occupied by a massive black Uber XL, and the silence was broken by the clatter of designer luggage wheels on the pavement. My son-in-law, Todd, was wrestling with 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases trying to fit them into the trunk. He was 40 years old, wearing a tracksuit that cost more than my first pickup truck, and sweating profusely despite the cool weather. I stood on the porch clutching my passport in one hand and a small carry-on bag in the other. I had packed light. Just a few shirts, my blood pressure medication, and the picture of my late wife, Catherine, that went everywhere with me. This was supposed to be the family trip of a lifetime. A 2-week getaway to Maui to celebrate my 72nd birthday. Or at least that was what they had told me when I wrote the check for the tickets 3 months ago. Todd slammed the trunk shut and wiped his forehead, looking at me with an expression that sat somewhere between annoyance and pity. He checked his gold watch, a flashy thing he had bought with his commission from the only house he had managed to sell last year. "We are running late, Garrison," Todd barked, not making eye contact. "The driver is charging us for wait time." I took a step forward, gripping the handrail. The wood felt solid under my palm. I had sanded and stained this railing myself. I knew every grain, every knot. I walked down the stairs, ready to hand my bag to the driver. Vanessa, my daughter, stepped out of the house. She was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses that hid her eyes. She stopped in front of me, blocking my path to the car. She placed a hand on my chest. Her nails were manicured, a sharp crimson red. "Dad, we need to talk," she said. Her voice had that sugary tone she used whenever she wanted something, or when she was about to deliver bad news. It was the same tone she used when she was 16 and crashed my sedan. "Talk about what?" I asked. "The flight leaves in 3 hours. We need to get through security." Vanessa sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation that smelled of peppermint gum. "Todd and I were up all night talking, and we are just so worried about you. We called Dr. Evans this morning. He said that with your blood pressure, the cabin pressure on a 6-hour flight over the ocean is just too risky. It could trigger a cardiac event." I stared at her. My grip on the passport tightened. "Vanessa, Dr. Evans retired 3 years ago. He is living in Florida playing golf. I saw Dr. Patel last week, and he said I have the heart of a 50-year-old. I ran 3 miles this morning while you two were still sleeping." Todd stepped in, looming over my shoulder. He liked to use his height to intimidate people, but he forgot that I had spent 40 years on construction sites, staring down union reps and building inspectors who were tougher than a failed real estate broker. "Look, Garrison, it is not up for debate," Todd said, his voice dropping an octave. "We are not going to be responsible for you having a stroke at 30,000 feet. It would ruin the trip for everyone, especially Mia. You do not want to traumatize your granddaughter, do you?" At the mention of Mia, I looked toward the back seat of the SUV. My 16-year-old granddaughter was sitting there, headphones on, looking out the window. She looked miserable. She caught my eye and gave a small, helpless wave. I knew instantly that they had told her I did not want to go. They had lied to her too. "So what is the plan?" I asked, keeping my voice level. I learned a long time ago that in a negotiation, the first person to raise their voice loses. I stay here. It is for the best, Dad, Vanessa said, quickly snatching the passport out of my hand before I could react. She slipped it into her purse with a practiced motion. We upgraded Mia to your business class seat. She needs the space to study. You know how important her grades are. You upgraded her, I repeated. With my ticket. The ticket I paid $4,000 for. It is a sunk cost, Garrison Todd said, waving his hand dismissively. Do not be cheap. We are doing this for your health. Besides, someone needs to watch the house. We fired the landscaping service to save a few bucks, so you need to water the lawn by hand every morning. And Buster needs his walks. Kennels are cruel, you know. They were leaving me behind to be the gardener and the dog sitter. I looked at the house. This was a 5-bedroom estate on prime waterfront property. It was worth $3 million easily in this market. I had built it for Catherine. I had poured the foundation, framed the walls, and laid the roof. Now my daughter and her husband acted like they owned it, and I was just the live-in maintenance staff. Fine, I said. I will stay. Go. Enjoy Hawaii. I turned to walk back up the stairs, but Vanessa grabbed my arm again. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Wait, Dad. There is one more thing. Since we will be gone for 2 weeks, and you are here alone, we need to be safe. If a package comes, or if there is some issue with the city or the utilities, you need to be able to sign for it. She dug into her purse past my stolen passport and pulled out a document. It was folded into a small square. She unfolded it and smoothed it out against the hood of the Uber. It was a single page, dense with text. Todd handed me a pen. Just sign here at the bottom, she said, pointing to a line marked Grantor. It just authorizes you to sign for certified mail and handle any minor repairs while we are out of range. You know how strict the HOA can be. I looked at the paper. The sun was glaring off the white page, making the text hard to read. Todd was tapping his foot. Come on, Garrison, the driver is going to leave. Todd snapped. Just sign the damn paper. It is just for the mail. Do not be so paranoid. Vanessa smiled again. Please, Dad. Do it for my peace of mind. I do not want to worry about the house falling apart while we are trying to relax. I looked at Mia in the car. She had taken off her headphones and was watching us. She looked scared. Not of me, but for me. That look told me everything I needed to know. I took the pen. I leaned over the hood of the car. I signed my name. Garrison Ford. Thank you. Daddy, Vanessa squealed. She snatched the paper back, blew on the ink and shoved it into her bag. She kissed my cheek, but her lips barely grazed my skin. It was cold. We will call you when we land, Todd said, getting into the front seat. Do not forget the lawn, and do not let Buster dig up the rose bushes. They slammed the car doors. The tinted windows rolled up. I stood on the driveway watching the black SUV pull away. It turned the corner and disappeared, leaving me standing alone in the shadow of the house I built. The silence that followed was heavy. It was not the peaceful silence of a morning by the lake. It was the silence of a crime scene after the perpetrators have fled. I stood there for a long time. The morning wind picked up, blowing dead leaves across the driveway. I needed to sweep them. That was probably on the list of chores Vanessa had left on the kitchen counter. I turned and walked back up the stairs. My knees didn't ache. My breath didn't catch. My heart beat steady and strong. A weak heart, they said. I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped into the foyer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Usually at this hour, Todd would be yelling at the television, watching financial news and cursing his bad luck, and Vanessa would be blending green smoothies that smelled like grass. Now the house felt vast and empty. I walked into the kitchen. On the marble island marble I had hand-selected from a quarry in Italy 20 years ago sat a notepad. Vanessa's handwriting was loopy and large. Dad. Instructions. 1. Water lawn at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Do not use sprinklers, they waste water. 2. Buster eats exactly 1 cup of food. No treats. He is on a diet. 3. Collect mail daily. Stack it on Todd's desk. 4. If the pool cleaner comes, tell him to come back in 2 weeks. We didn't pay him yet. I read the list. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest, but it was a dry, bitter thing. They treated me like an employee they were looking for an excuse to fire. I walked through the living room. The furniture was theirs. Modern, uncomfortable beige sofas that cost a fortune and stained if you looked at them wrong. They had moved in 3 years ago, just for a few months, while Todd got his business off the ground. 3 years later, they had taken over the master suite and moved me into the guest room downstairs. They called it the in-law suite, to make it sound nice, but I knew what it was. It was displacement. I went into Todd's office. It used to be my library. I had mahogany bookshelves lining the walls filled with history books and architectural guides. Now those shelves were cluttered with Todd's get-rich-quick seminar binders and motivational trophies he bought for himself. I sat in his chair. It squeaked. Cheap manufacturing. I looked at the desk. It was a mess of unpaid bills and overdue notices. Todd always intercepted the mail before I could see it, but he was sloppy. He left things out. I thought about the piece of paper I had just signed. Just for the mail, Vanessa had said. Just for utilities. I am a general contractor. I have been reading contracts since before Todd was born. I know that a document authorizing someone to receive mail does not require a notarized signature block or legal terminology regarding fiduciary powers. I reached into my pocket. I hadn't signed the paper they gave me. I had used a little sleight of hand. When I leaned over the hood of the car, I had swapped their paper with a receipt I had in my pocket. I signed the receipt. I palmed their document. They were in such a rush, so blinded by their own arrogance and the rush to get to the airport lounge that they didn't even check. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out my magnifying glass. My eyes were good, but for fine print, I trusted glass. I unfolded the document on the desk. I smoothed out the creases. I began to read. It wasn't a mail authorization form. It wasn't a permission slip for the HOA. At the top, in bold, capitalized letters, it read, "Durable Power of Attorney." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I read on. The clauses were specific, terrifyingly specific. Hereby granting the agent Todd Miller full power and authority to act on my behalf, to sell, convey mortgage, or otherwise dispose of any real property, to access, withdraw, and close any bank accounts, investment portfolios, or retirement funds, and to make medical decisions, including the admission to assisted living facilities or long-term care institutions. I sat back. The leather chair groaned. They weren't just going on vacation. They were going to Hawaii to celebrate the coup. They wanted me to sign away my life, my home, and my freedom on the hood of an Uber. If I had signed that paper, Todd could have sold this house while he was sitting by the pool in Maui. He could have drained my savings account to pay off his gambling debts. I knew about those too, though he thought he was clever hiding them. He could have had me committed to Sunnyside, that state-run nursing home 3 towns over, where the smell of bleach never quite covers the smell of despair. They wanted to erase me. They thought I was a senile old man who just wanted to garden and watch game shows. They thought I was weak. They thought the man who built a construction empire from a single toolbox was now just a signature waiting to be harvested. I looked at the date on the document. It was dated for today. They had this planned. They had this drafted. They probably paid a lawyer, a shady one, likely one of Todd's drinking buddies, to draw it up. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky. I saw my reflection in the glass. I didn't see a victim. I saw Garrison Ford. I saw the man who once fired an entire crew for stealing copper wire. I saw the man who finished a roofing job with a broken ankle because the client needed to move in. I was not going to be a victim in my own home. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Vanessa. Landed in SF for layover. Hope you're relaxing, Dad. Don't forget to check the mail. Love you. I stared at the screen. Love. They didn't know the meaning of the word. They loved my assets. They loved my liquidity. They loved the roof I provided. But they didn't love me. I walked back to the desk. I didn't get angry. Anger is a waste of energy. Anger is messy. I needed to be precise. I needed to be a demolition expert. You don't just swing a sledgehammer at a supporting wall. You identify the stress points. You plant the charges. You control the collapse. I opened Todd's computer. He hadn't logged out. He never logged out. His password was Millionaire1, pathetic. I opened his email. I searched for loan. The results flooded the screen. Dozens of emails. But the most recent one caught my eye. It was from a sender named Quick Capital Hard Money. Subject loan approval. 32 Lakeview Drive. I clicked it. Mr. Miller, per our discussion, we are prepared to issue the bridge loan of $200,000 against the equity of the property at 32 Lakeview Drive. Interest rate will be 15% monthly. We understand you will be providing the power of attorney and the property title transfer upon your return from Hawaii. Funds will be wired to your account this Friday. Friday. That was in 2 days. Todd had already spent the money in his head. He was borrowing $200,000 against my house, a house he didn't own yet, using a power of attorney I hadn't signed. He was gambling with my life. He was going to use that money to pay off his bookie and fund their lavish lifestyle, and when the high-interest loan came due, he would sell the house to cover it and dump me in Sunnyside. It was a perfect plan. Evil, but perfect. Except for one detail. He didn't have my signature. I looked around the room. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene in the making. It was a prison they had built for me, decorated with my own money. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't call the police, not yet. The police would call it a civil matter. They would say it's a family dispute. No, I needed a shark. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. Law offices of Pinter and Associates, a receptionist answered. Get me Pinter, I said. Tell him Garrison Ford is on the line. Tell him I'm ready to pull the trigger on the trust. I hung up. I looked at the power of attorney document on the desk. I picked up a lighter from Todd's desk. He smoked cigars when I wasn't home, thinking I couldn't smell it. I lit the corner of the document. I watched the flame eat the paper. I watched the words full power and authority turn into black ash. I dropped it into the metal wastebasket and watched it burn until there was nothing left. Vanessa wanted me to take care of the house. Todd wanted me to handle the minor repairs. Fine. I would take care of it. I would fix the problem permanently. They thought I was too old to fly. They thought I was ground crew. They were about to find out that I was the one controlling the airspace, and their flight was about to be canceled. I grabbed a trash bag. I walked to the closet where Vanessa kept her collection of designer handbags, Hermes, Chanel, Gucci. Thousands of dollars of leather sitting on shelves I built. I opened the bag. I started sweeping them in. It was time to clean house. The hallway leading to the study was dark, and the silence of the empty house felt heavy like a wet wool blanket. I stood in front of the door to what used to be my sanctuary. For 20 years, that room had been my library, my retreat, the place where I drafted the blueprints for half the commercial buildings in downtown Seattle. I had installed that door myself, hanging it on heavy brass hinges that never squeaked. Now it was locked. Todd had installed a cheap keypad handle, one of those battery-operated plastic things you buy at a hardware store when you want to pretend you have security clearance. It was an insult to the solid oak door. I did not have the code, and I certainly was not going to call my son-in-law in Hawaii to ask for it. I went to the garage and retrieved my tool bag. It was old leather worn smooth by decades of grease and sweat. I pulled out a flathead screwdriver and a small hex wrench. Todd thought a keypad was security. He did not understand that a lock is only as strong as the screws holding it in place. It took me less than 2 minutes to dismantle the mechanism. I caught the screws in my palm before they hit the floor. I pulled the handle off, exposing the mechanism, and turned the latch. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. It was the stale odor of cheap cigars and nervous sweat. The room was a disaster. My mahogany bookshelves were cluttered with stacks of unopened envelopes and half-eaten protein bars. The beautiful drafting table I had used to design this very house was buried under a mountain of glossy brochures for get-rich-quick seminars and luxury car leases. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. I did not turn on the overhead light. The glow from the street lamps outside filtered through the blinds, casting long, jagged shadows across the room. I walked to the desk. It was a chaotic mess of papers, but I ignored them for the moment. I focused on the computer tower humming beneath the desk. The monitor was asleep, a black square reflecting my own tired face. I tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life. Todd had not logged out. He never did. He was the kind of man who believed he was the smartest person in the room, so he never bothered with basic precautions. His browser was open with 19 tabs running. I sat in his chair. The leather was sticky. I felt like an intruder in my own home, but I reminded myself that they were the intruders. They were the parasites. I was the host body finally waking up to the infection. I started clicking through the tabs. The first few were innocuous enough. A fantasy football league, a tracking page for a package from Gucci, a listing for a Porsche 911 he was clearly fantasizing about. But then I saw the banking tabs. I clicked on his checking account. The balance was in the red, -$400. I clicked on his savings, $12. This was a man who drove a leased Range Rover and wore Italian suits, yet he did not have enough liquid cash to buy a tank of gas. I moved to his email. The inbox was a wall of red flags. Final notice? Past due. Action required. But I was not looking for his utility bills. I was looking for the shark. I searched for the sender I had seen briefly earlier that day, Quick Capital. The thread opened. I began to read from the bottom up. The first email was dated 3 weeks ago. Mr. Miller, we have reviewed your application. Due to your credit score of 580 and your current debt-to-income ratio, we cannot offer you a traditional line of credit. However, we can offer a hard money bridge loan secured against real estate assets. I scrolled up. Todd's reply was desperate. I have the asset. It is a waterfront property on Lake Washington. Valuation is $3 million minimum. I need $200,000 cash by the end of the month. I can pay the points. My hand tightened on the mouse. He was leveraging my home. A home he did not own. A home my name was on. I kept reading. The lender's response was predatory. We can do it. Since you are not on the title, we will need a durable power of attorney from the owner, Mr. Garrison Ford, granting you full rights to encumber the property. Interest rate will be 15% monthly due on the first. Default results in immediate foreclosure proceedings. 15% monthly. That was not a loan. That was financial suicide. That was a mob rate. Annualized, that was 180% interest. Todd was not just borrowing money, he was lighting a fuse. If he missed a payment, they would not just come for the money, they would come for the house. They would seize the deed. They would evict me. I scrolled to the most recent email sent yesterday. Todd wrote, "The POA is signed. We are heading to Hawaii to celebrate. I will wire the title transfer fees on Friday when the loan hits. Do not worry about the old man. He is out of the picture. out of the picture. That was me, the man who taught him how to tie a tie for his wedding day, the man who paid for the reception. I was just an obstacle to be removed. But why did he need the money so badly? $200,000 was a specific number. You do not borrow that kind of money at 15% interest to buy handbags. You borrow that kind of money because someone is going to break your legs if you don't. I minimized the email and went back to the browser tabs. I saw a logo I recognized. Vegas Slots Online. I clicked it. It was logged in. The user profile name was Todd the God. I went to the transaction history. It was a bloodbath. Page after page of deposits. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, all lost. He was playing high-stakes poker and blackjack, and he was losing consistently. He was chasing his losses. The dates lined up perfectly. Every time he made a sale or got a commission, it went straight into the casino's pocket. I found a tab for a site called SureBet Sports. It was an offshore betting site. The current balance was negative $140,000. There was a message in his inbox on the site. User Vinny K message. You are out of time, Todd. Friday. Or we contact your wife, and then we come visit you. I sat back in the chair. The air in the room felt thin. This wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Todd was drowning. He had gambled away everything he had and everything he didn't have. He was in the hole to loan sharks and bookies. He needed my house to save his life. And Vanessa. Did she know? I went back to the email. I searched for her name. I found a thread between them from 2 days ago. Subject: Hawaii and Dad. Vanessa, are you sure this loan will cover everything I really want to upgrade to the suite? And what about Dad? If we sell the house when we get back, where does he go, Todd? I told you, babe. The loan pays off Vinny and gives us breathing room to flip the house. We put the old man in Sunnyside. I already talked to the director. They have a bed in the Medicaid wing. It is cheap. We tell him it is temporary while we look for a new place. Once he is in the system, he is their problem. Vanessa, okay. Just make sure it is clean. I do not want to feel guilty. And make sure he signs the papers before we leave. I do not want a scene at the airport. I closed my eyes. A single tear leaked out, but I wiped it away before it could fall. My daughter. The little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. The woman I walked down the aisle. She knew. She knew about the gambling, or at least the debt. She knew they were going to sell my home. And her only concern was that she didn't want to feel guilty. She wanted a clean conscience while she threw me into a state-run facility to rot. I looked at the desk again. Under a pile of unpaid credit card bills, I saw a glossy brochure. Sunnyside Care Center. I pulled it out. It looked cheerful on the cover. Smiling seniors playing cards. But I knew Sunnyside. I had done a contracting job there 10 years ago repairing a leaky roof. It smelled of urine and boiled cabbage. The staff was overworked and underpaid. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. That was my future. That was what they had planned for me. A cot in a shared room while they lived it up on the equity I had spent 30 years building. I felt a cold rage settle in my gut. It was a familiar feeling. It was the feeling you get when you realize the structural integrity of a building is compromised and the only solution is to tear it down. You do not patch a rot like this. You do not paint over it. You demolish it. I needed copies. I needed evidence. If I went to the police now, it would be a civil dispute. It would be my word against theirs. But if I had these emails, these financial records, I had leverage. I found a USB drive in the drawer. I plugged it in. I started dragging files. The loan application. The gambling history. The emails between Todd and the shark. The emails between Todd and Vanessa. I took screenshots of everything. I forwarded the most damning emails to my own secure account, the one they didn't know about. I was methodical. I was precise. I checked the timestamps. I organized the folders. Evidence, gambling. Evidence, loan shark. Evidence, conspiracy. As the files transferred, I looked around the room. I saw a framed photo on the shelf. It was Todd and Vanessa on their wedding day. They looked so happy. I was in the background of the photo, blurring slightly out of focus, smiling like a proud father. I grabbed the photo. I slid the back open and pulled the picture out. I crumpled the photo in my fist until it was a tight ball of glossy paper and tossed it into the trash can. I placed the empty frame back on the shelf face down. The transfer completed. I pulled the USB drive and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy like a weapon. I shut down the browser windows. I left the computer exactly as I found it. I picked up the screwdriver and the screws. I walked to the door. I reassembled the lock mechanism. I tightened the screws until they bit into the wood solid and true. I tested the handle. Locked. I gathered my tools. I wiped the doorknob with my handkerchief to remove my prints. Not because I thought they would dust for them, but because I didn't want to leave even a trace of myself in this room. This room was a tomb. It was where their marriage and their morality had come to die. I walked back down the hallway to the kitchen. The house was silent again, but now the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. I looked at the clock. It was 2:00 a.m. in Seattle. In Hawaii, it was 11:00 p.m. They were probably ordering room service, celebrating their brilliance, toasting to the old man they had outsmarted. I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out my dedicated notebook. I wrote down the numbers I had seen. The loan amount, the interest rate, the dates. Then I picked up the phone again. I dialed Pinter's private line. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Garrison, it's the middle of the night." "Wake up, Art," I said. "I have the smoking gun. They are leveraging the house for a hard money loan to pay off illegal gambling debts. They are planning to put me in Sunnyside. I need you to expedite the sale. I want the house gone before they land." Pinter was silent for a moment. Then I heard the rustle of sheets and the click of a lamp. "Gambling debts, hard money. Garrison, if they encumber the title before we transfer it to the trust." "They can't," I cut him off. "I didn't sign the power of attorney. They have nothing, but they think they do. They promised the lender the title on Friday. That gives us 48 hours. If they promised a loan shark the title on Friday and the title isn't theirs to give," Pinter trailed off. "Garrison, do you realize what you are doing? If we sell the house out from under them, Todd is going to be facing people who break knees for a living." I looked out the window at the dark water of the lake. I thought about the brochure for Sunnyside. I thought about Vanessa's fake kiss on my cheek. "I know," I said. "That is not my problem. That is a contractor dispute, and I am canceling the contract." "All right," Pinter said, his voice sharpening into professional focus. "I will have the papers ready by 8 a.m. Who is the buyer?" "Call Westlake Development," I said. "Tell them I accept their offer from last year. Cash only. 2 million flat. But there is a condition, a non-negotiable condition." "What is it?" "I want the structure demolished immediately. I want the land cleared. By the time my daughter gets back from Hawaii, I want nothing left but dirt." "Demolition?" Pinter asked. "Why?" "Because," I said, my voice flat and hard, "I built this house with love. They filled it with lies. I am not leaving it standing for them to defile. Scorch the earth, Art. Scorch it." I hung up the phone. I stood in the kitchen for a moment longer. Then I walked to the refrigerator. I opened it and took out a bottle of beer. I sat on the stool in the dark and took a long drink. The investigation was over. The demolition was about to begin. The house was dark except for the blue light of the television flickering in the living room. I sat in my recliner, a cold beer sweating in my hand, waiting for the signal. It was 7 in the evening in Seattle, which meant it was late afternoon in Maui. The digital clock on the cable box clicked over to 7:15, and right on cue, my phone began to vibrate on the side table. The screen lit up with a photo of Vanessa, a selfie she had taken years ago, where she looked like a stranger, heavily filtered and pouting. It was a FaceTime request. I took a deep breath. This was the performance of a lifetime. I had to shed the skin of Garrison Ford, the contractor who could spot a load-bearing wall from 50 feet away, and become Garrison, the confused pensioner who could barely operate a microwave. I let it ring 3 times to simulate a slow reaction time before sliding my thumb across the screen. I held the phone too close to my face, angling the camera so it only showed my forehead and the ceiling fans spinning lazily above me. "Is this thing on?" I shouted at the screen, feigning deafness. "I cannot see anything. It is just black." "Hello, Vanessa, are you there?" I heard a sigh of exasperation crackle through the speaker. It was a sound I knew well, a sound that used to make me feel guilty, but now just fueled the cold fire in my gut. "Dad, move the phone away from your face," Vanessa's voice was sharp. "You are pointing it at your eyebrows. Hold it out, like we practiced." I fumbled with the device, pretending to almost drop it, before stabilizing the image. The screen resolved into high-definition Technicolor. Vanessa was sitting on a balcony that overlooked a turquoise ocean. Palm trees swayed in the background, and tiki torches were just starting to flicker to life. She was wearing a white linen robe that probably cost more than my first mortgage payment, and holding a drink garnished with an entire fruit salad. She looked tan relaxed, and completely oblivious to the fact that her vacation was being financed by a loan shark who wanted to break her husband's legs. Behind her I saw Todd pacing. He was wearing swim trunks and a polo shirt, but he looked like he was walking to the gallows. He was checking his phone obsessively, tapping the screen with a manic rhythm. He wasn't enjoying the view. He was counting down the hours until Friday. "Hi, Dad," Vanessa said, taking a long sip of her cocktail. She grimaced. "Ugh, too much rum. You would think for $1,200 a night the Four Seasons could mix a decent Mai Tai. The service here has really gone downhill." The concierge took 10 minutes to bring up extra towels. "Can you believe that?" I forced a confused smile onto my face. "That sounds nice, honey," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It is raining here." "Just rain." "Did you say $1,200? That is a lot of money." "Do not worry about the money, Dad," Todd snapped from the background without looking up. "We have it covered. Just listen to Vanessa." "Right," Vanessa said, rolling her eyes. "Dad, did you do the list? The lawn, the dog?" I nodded slowly, blinking rapidly behind my glasses. Yes. I watered the grass. Buster is fine. He is sleeping in the kitchen. I ate some soup. Campbell's. Tomato." She did not care about the soup. She did not care about the dog. She was circling the prey. "That is good, Dad," she said, her voice dropping into that fake sweetness again. "Listen, we were worried about that paper. The one at the airport. You know, the mail authorization. Did you put it somewhere safe?" I paused. I let the silence stretch. I scratched my head, looking off camera, as if trying to retrieve a memory from a dusty filing cabinet. "The paper," I mumbled. "The one on the car." "Yes. I signed it." "I know I signed it." Todd stopped pacing. He turned toward the camera, his eyes wide and hungry. "You signed it, Garrison." "That is great. Where is it? Did you leave it on the desk?" I frowned. "I think so. Or maybe I put it in the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus. No, wait. I might have put it in the toolbox in the garage. You know, I like to keep important papers with my tools. It keeps them safe from the humidity." Todd's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his sunburn. "The garage," he shouted. Garrison, that is a legal document. You cannot just throw it in a toolbox with greasy wrenches. We need that paper. It has to be clean. I recoiled, holding the phone away as if his voice physically hurt me. Do not yell, Todd, I whined, playing the victim. I am trying to remember. I am old. My memory is not what it used to be. I put it somewhere safe. I just cannot recall exactly which drawer. I will look for it tomorrow. No, Vanessa interjected, leaning forward so her face filled the screen. Her eyes were hard. No, Dad. You need to find it now. Tonight. It is very important. Why is it so important? I asked innocently. It is just for the mail, right? The mailman does not come until noon. Vanessa hesitated. She looked back at Todd. They exchanged a look of pure panic. They needed that document physically in their hands, or at least scanned and emailed by Friday morning to close the loan. If I had lost it, or if I had greased it up in a toolbox, their house of cards would collapse. It is not just the mail, Dad, Vanessa said, her voice tight. We have a friend coming by tomorrow. A friend of Todd's. He needs to pick up the paper. He is going to scan it and send it to us so we can handle some bills. A friend, I asked. Who? I do not like strangers in the house, Vanessa. You know I get nervous. He is not a stranger, Todd barked, moving next to Vanessa. His name is Mr. Black. He is a consultant. He is just going to stop by around 10 in the morning. You let him in, you give him the paper, and he leaves. Simple. Do not talk to him. Just give him the paper. Mr. Black. That sounded like a fake name if I ever heard one. Or maybe it was the appraiser. Or maybe it was the bagman for the loan shark coming to verify the asset. Whoever he was the next step in their plan. They were sending someone to the house while I was supposed to be a confused old man guarding the door. I do not know, Todd, I said, shaking my head. I have to prune the roses tomorrow. I might be in the garden. I might not hear the doorbell. Dad, listen to me, Vanessa hissed. You will be in the house. You will find that paper tonight. You will put it on the kitchen table. When Mr. Black comes, you hand it to him. If you do not, if you mess this up, we might have to come home early, and we will be very, very angry. Do you want us to be angry? Do you want to ruin my vacation? The threat was clear. It was the way you talk to a disobedient child. Do what you are told, or there will be consequences. I lowered my head, acting chastised. No, honey. I do not want to ruin your trip. I will look for it. I will find it. Good, Vanessa said, leaning back and taking another drink. Her relief was palpable. Just find it. And Dad, try not to make a mess of the kitchen. Mr. Black is a professional. We do not want the house looking like a pigsty. I stared at her pixelated face. She was sitting in paradise funded by my potential homelessness, worrying about the cleanliness of a kitchen she planned to sell out from under me. I understand, I said. I will clean up. I will be ready. Okay, we have a dinner reservation at Nobu, Todd said, checking his watch again. We have to go. Find the paper, Garrison. Do not let us down. The screen went black. The call ended. I lowered the phone to my lap. The bumbling old man vanished. I sat up straight. My eyes adjusted to the gloom of the living room. So they were sending a friend tomorrow. Mr. Black. I knew exactly who that was. It wasn't a courier. It was the appraiser for the hard money lender. Quick Capital wouldn't wire $200,000 without eyes on the property. They needed to verify the equity. They needed to make sure the house wasn't a shack falling into the lake. They needed to see the interior. And Todd told him I would be here. He told him I was compliant. He probably told him I was the tenant or the grandfather who didn't know what was going on. Just give him the paper, Todd had said. I looked at the empty fireplace. I thought about the paper burning in the trash can in the study. I didn't have the paper. Even if I wanted to give it to this Mr. Black, I couldn't. But that was fine, because I had something else to give him. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took out a fresh bottle of water. I wasn't drinking soup. I had ordered a steak from the butcher shop down the street earlier that day. A thick ribeye. I was going to grill it on the deck tonight. I was going to eat well. I needed my strength. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. I had an appointment with Pinter at 8. I had the demolition crew on standby for the afternoon. And at 10 o'clock I had a date with Mr. Black. I wasn't going to let him in. I wasn't going to hand him a paper. I was going to use him. I walked out onto the deck. The night air was cooling down. The lights of the other houses around the lake were twinkling like stars. They were homes filled with families living their lives oblivious to the war being fought in the house on the hill. I looked at my garden. The roses Vanessa loved so much were blooming red and vibrant. I had planted them for her mother. Catherine had loved this garden. She had spent hours here on her knees in the dirt, making things grow. "I am sorry, Catherine," I whispered to the dark water, "but the rot is too deep. We have to clear the lot." I went back inside and locked the sliding glass door. I didn't engage the security system. I wanted Mr. Black to come. I wanted him to see the property. But he wasn't going to see what Todd promised him. He was going to see the truth. I went to the hall closet and pulled out my old work boots. I set them by the door. I laid out my best flannel shirt and my canvas work pants. Tomorrow I wasn't Garrison the retiree. Tomorrow I was Garrison the foreman. I checked my phone one last time. No new messages. They were probably at dinner now, ordering the most expensive sushi on the menu, putting it on a credit card they expected me to pay off eventually. Let them eat. Let them drink. Let them think they have won. I turned off the lights downstairs and climbed the steps to the guest room. I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. That was their territory now, tainted by their greed. I slept in the small room downstairs, the one that used to be for guests. It was sparse and clean. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I didn't need sleeping pills. I had a plan, and a man with a plan sleeps like a baby. Tomorrow, the demolition begins, and Mr. Black was going to get a front row seat. The morning fog rolled off Lake Washington, thick and gray, clinging to the Douglas firs like wet cotton. It was 9:45. I stood in the driveway wearing my oldest pair of canvas work pants and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. I had a pair of pruning shears in my hand and a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. I was not Garrison Ford, the owner of a $3 million estate. I was Garrison, the hired help. I was the gardener. I was the invisible man. I had positioned myself strategically near the front gate, pretending to deadhead the rhododendrons. It was a task that required little attention, but gave me a perfect vantage point of the driveway. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. It was the same feeling I used to get right before a demolition charge went off. The anticipation of the collapse. At exactly 10 o'clock, a matte black Dodge Charger turned off the main road and crunched onto the gravel of my driveway. It was an aggressive car. Tinted windows, chrome rims, the kind of vehicle driven by a man who wants you to know he collects debts for a living. The engine growled and cut out. The driver's door opened and Mr. Black stepped out. He was not a courier. He was definitely not a friend. He was a man in his late 30s wearing a suit that was too tight and sunglasses that cost too much. He had a Bluetooth earpiece jammed into his ear, and he was carrying a digital laser measure and a clipboard. He looked at the house like a butcher looking at a cow. He was assessing the cuts. I kept my head down, snipping at a branch that didn't need cutting. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He walked to the front of the car and looked around. He didn't see the lake. He didn't see the craftsmanship of the stone facade I had laid myself. He saw equity. He saw a payday. He spotted me. He walked over his shoes, crunching on the gravel. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't introduce himself. "Hey, old-timer," he barked. "Is the owner around?" I looked up, adjusting my glasses to look sufficiently confused. I let my mouth hang open slightly. "The owner," I repeated slowly, affecting a slight tremor in my voice. "Mr. Miller. He is in Hawaii. The islands. Big vacation." Mr. Black sneered. "Yeah, I know where he is. I meant the other one, the father-in-law." "Ford. Is he here?" I pointed a shaking finger at my own chest. "Mr. Ford is inside. Sleeping. He sleeps a lot. I just do the yard. Water the grass. Keep it green." Black looked at me with dismissal. "Good. Keep him asleep. I do not need him wandering around asking questions. I am here for the exterior valuation." Todd authorized it. He waved a piece of paper at me. I recognized it immediately. It was a digital printout of the email I had seen last night. It wasn't the power of attorney. It was just an email from Todd saying, "Go ahead and inspect the property. The old man won't bother you." "You go ahead, sir," I said, returning to my bush. "I will just be here, pruning." Black ignored me and started walking the perimeter of the house. He held up his laser measure, shooting distances from the corner of the garage to the property line. He was fast. He knew what he was looking for. He wasn't inspecting the quality of the build. He was checking the square footage to make sure it matched the county records. He was verifying the collateral. I followed him, keeping a respectful distance, moving from bush to bush like I was working my way down a line. I needed to be close. I needed to hear him talk. He rounded the corner to the back deck. He whistled when he saw the view. "Not bad, Todd," he muttered to himself. "Not bad at all." Then his phone rang. He tapped his earpiece. "Yeah," he said. "I am at the site now." I froze behind a large hydrangea bush. I stopped snipping. I held my breath. "Yeah, Vinny, it is legit," Black said. "The house is massive. Waterfront. Easy 3 mil in this market if we fire sale it. Yeah, the equity covers the 200 grand plus the VIG." Vinny. That was the name from the gambling site. This wasn't a bank appraiser. This was the mob's accountant. Black walked up onto the deck, testing the wood with his heel. He leaned against the railing I had built. No issues with access," he continued. "The place is practically abandoned. Just the gardener here. And the old man is inside asleep. Todd said he is senile. Said he wouldn't know a foreclosure notice from a pizza coupon." My grip on the shears tightened until my knuckles turned white. Senile. That was their narrative. That was how they justified it. Black laughed, a short bark of a sound. "Yeah, the paperwork is the only snag. Todd says he is sending the power of attorney on Friday morning. As soon as the wire hits, he signs the deed over to the shell company. We hold it in escrow until he pays the principal, which we both know he won't." He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. "Yeah, Vinny, I know. If he defaults next month, we evict. What about the old guy?" I leaned in closer. The thorns of the rose bush scratched my cheek, but I didn't flinch. This was the moment. This was the sentence. Black nodded. "Uh-huh. Yeah, Todd briefed me on that. Sunnyside. Yeah, the facility off Route 9. He has a bed reserved. Section D." Section D. I knew Sunnyside. I knew Section D. It wasn't the assisted living wing. It wasn't the memory care unit where they played music from the 50s. Section D was the high-security ward. It was the lockdown unit for indigent patients with severe behavioral issues. It was a holding pen. It was where they put people they wanted to medicate into oblivion. It was a place where people went in and never came out. Black was still talking. "Yeah, Todd said the old man gets aggressive. Said we might need to sedate him to get him out of the house. He authorized us to use a transport team. You know the guys we used for the eviction in Renton? Yeah, rough handlers. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. They weren't just planning to move me. They were planning to extract me. Rough handlers. They were going to drag me out of my own home, and throw me into a lockdown ward where my screams would be treated as symptoms of dementia. Black laughed again. Yeah, it is cold, Vinny, but business is business. Todd just wants the cash. He said the old man is dead weight, said he has lived long enough. If he lasts 6 months in Section D, it will be a miracle. The infection rate there is, let's just say, cost-effective. Cost-effective. That was the phrase that did it. That was the phrase that turned my fear into something else. Something harder. Something lethal. They weren't just stealing my house. They were sentencing me to death. A slow, lonely, confused death in a room that smelled of bleach and rot. They were going to erase my mind with drugs and erase my life with a signature. And my daughter, my Vanessa, she had agreed to this. She knew. Make sure it is clean, she had said. I do not want to feel guilty. Sending me to Section D wasn't clean. It was an execution. Black turned around, walking back toward the front of the house. All right, Vinny. I have seen enough. The asset is solid. Tell Todd the loan is approved pending the document on Friday. I will call him now. I waited until he rounded the corner before I moved. I didn't follow him this time. I didn't need to hear any more. I had heard my own obituary. I stood in the shadow of the house I built. I looked at the wood I had cut, the stone I had laid. It was all just a pile of materials now. It was a cage. I walked back to the front driveway just as Black was getting into his Charger. He rolled down the window. Hey, Gardner, he shouted. I looked up, my face a mask of dull confusion. Yes, sir. Tell Mr. Ford he has visitors coming on Friday. Tell him to pack a bag, a small one. He grinned, showing too many teeth. He won't need much where he is going. He revved the engine and peeled out gravel, spraying from his tires. I watched the taillights disappear down the road. I stood there for a long moment. The silence of the morning returned, but the birdsong sounded different now. It sounded like a warning. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from age, not from fear. From rage. Pack a bag, he said. I turned and looked at the house. I wasn't going to pack a bag. I wasn't going to Sunnyside. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed Pinter. Garrison. Pinter answered on the first ring. Did the appraiser show up? He just left, I said. My voice was steady, but it sounded like it was coming from someone else. Someone dangerous. It is worse than we thought, Art. They are putting me in the lockdown ward at Sunnyside. They are planning to sedate me to get me out. Friday. They are coming Friday. There was a silence on the line. Then Pinter swore softly. Lockdown Garrison, that is criminal. We need to go to the police. No, I said. The police will file a report. They will investigate. And while they investigate, Todd will panic and do something stupid. I do not want an investigation. I want an ending. What do you want to do? Is the paperwork ready? It is on my desk. The trust transfer is complete. You have sole authority. Westlake Development sent the proof of funds. 2 million cash. They are ready to close. Good, I said. Call them. Tell them the deal is off, unless they can have a demolition crew here by noon. Not tomorrow. Today, noon. Garrison, you can't just... I can. I cut him off. It is my property. I want it gone. I want the excavators here in 2 hours. I want the utility lines capped. I want the windows smashed. I want this house to cease to exist. But the furniture, your things. I am packing my wife's pictures and my clothes now, I said. Everything else stays. Let them crush the Italian marble. Let them splinter the custom cabinets. It is all tainted art. It is all poisoned. And Todd. When he finds out, when he finds out, I said, looking at the spot where Black's car had been, he is going to realize that he sold a house that doesn't exist to a man named Vinny who doesn't take refunds. He dug a grave for me, Art. I am just going to make sure he falls into it first. I will make the call, Pinter said. God help them, Garrison. God has nothing to do with this, I said. This is just business. I hung up. I walked back into the house. I didn't take off my boots. I walked across the expensive beige carpet, leaving tracks of mud and dirt. I didn't care. I went to the mantel and picked up the urn that held Catherine's ashes. We are leaving Katie, I whispered. We are going on a trip, and we are not coming back. I went to my room. I pulled out my old military duffel bag. I packed my clothes. I packed my documents. I packed the photo albums. I left everything else. Vanessa's handbags were still in the trash bag in the closet. Todd's motivational trophies were still on the shelf. The big screen TV. The designer sofas. The crystal chandelier. Let it all burn. Let it all crumble. At 11:45 a.m., I heard the rumble. It was a deep mechanical sound that vibrated in the floorboards. It was the sound of heavy diesel engines. I walked out the front door with my duffel bag over my shoulder. Coming up the driveway was a convoy. A massive yellow excavator led the way, its steel bucket gleaming in the sun. Behind it was a bulldozer and a dump truck. The crew foreman jumped out of a pickup truck. He held a clipboard. "Mr. Ford," he asked, looking at my work clothes. "That is me, I said. "We got a rush order from Westlake. Total demolition, foundation removal, site clearing. You sure about this, boss?" "It is a nice house." I looked at the house one last time. I saw the window where Vanessa used to wave at me when she came home from school. I saw the porch where Todd had asked for my permission to marry her. I saw the lies embedded in the mortar. "It has termites," I said, my face stone cold. "Structural rot. Take it down, all of it." "Where do you want us to start?" "Start with the master bedroom," I said. "Second floor, east corner." That was where they slept. That was where they plotted. "You got it, boss." The foreman signaled the excavator. The engine roared. The hydraulic arm lifted, blotting out the sun. I walked down the driveway past the machines. I didn't look back. I heard the first crunch of wood and glass shattering. It sounded like a gunshot. I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to Vanessa. Not to Todd. I called the airline. "I need a ticket," I said. "One way. Rome. First class. Leaving tonight." The house was coming down, but I was finally taking off. The office of Arthur Pinter was located in a brick building downtown that had survived 3 earthquakes and 2 tech booms. It smelled of old paper and lemon polish, the kind of smell that signaled serious business was conducted there. I walked past the receptionist who was just unlocking the front door. She looked at my muddy boots and my duffel bag with alarm, but I didn't stop. I walked straight to the corner office. Art was sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single redwood tree. He was 70 years old, with a mane of white hair and eyes that had seen every kind of lie a human being could tell. He was on the phone, but when he saw me, he hung up without saying goodbye. He looked at my clothes, the dust on my shoulders, the grim set of my jaw. "You look like you just walked off a job site, Garrison," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Or a war zone." "Both," I said, dropping my bag on his leather sofa. I sat down in the client chair. It groaned under my weight. I felt heavy. Not tired, just heavy with the gravity of what I was about to do. Art looked at me over his reading glasses. "I got your call last night. I thought you were drunk or having a stroke." "Demolition Garrison." "Really? You built that house? I remember when you poured the slab. You put a coin in the concrete for good luck, a silver dollar." "I remember," I said. "It was a 1922 peace dollar. Catherine gave it to me. I paused. The memory of my wife usually brought me comfort. Today, it brought me clarity. It did not bring us luck, Art. It just bought us time. And now the time is up. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out something far more dangerous. It was a thick leather binder cracked with age. The gold lettering on the spine had faded, but it was still legible. The Ford Family Trust. I slammed it onto the desk. Dust motes danced in the morning light. Do you remember this? I asked. Art looked at the binder. He nodded slowly. 15 years ago, right after Catherine got the diagnosis, she wanted to make sure everything was airtight. She didn't want probate. She didn't want the government taking a cut. And she didn't want Vanessa to have unrestricted access, I added. Even then, she knew. Mothers always know, Art. She made me promise. She said Garrison put it all in the trust. Make yourself the sole trustee. Make yourself the only one who can sign the checks, the deeds, the titles. I opened the binder. The pages were yellowing, but the signatures were bold in blue ink. Todd thinks he is clever, I said, tapping the page. He thinks he can get a hard money loan against the house because he thinks the house is in my name. He thinks a power of attorney over me gives him power over the property. But it doesn't, Art said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Because you don't own the house, Garrison. The trust owns the house. And unless that power of attorney specifically grants him powers as a trustee of the Ford Family Trust, which I know for a fact it does not, because I wrote the trust bylaws to prevent exactly that, then he has nothing I finished for him. He is trying to mortgage a ghost. He promised a shark he would hand over a title he cannot touch. Art chuckled, but it was a dry sound. That is going to be a very uncomfortable conversation for him when he gets back. But Garrison, this protects you. The trust protects the asset. You don't need to destroy the house to stop him. We just show the lender the trust documents. The loan falls through. Todd gets sued. You keep the house. I shook my head. No, that is not enough. If I keep the house, they will come back. Vanessa will cry. She will bring Mia. She will say they have nowhere to go. She will guilt me. And I am old, Art. I am tired. One day I might give in. One day I might actually get sick. And then they will be right there waiting like vultures on a fence post. I leaned forward. I need to remove the bait. I need to erase the asset. I don't want to win a legal battle. I want to end the war. Art sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You are serious. You really want to sell it to Westlake? I am. Call them. Art reached for his phone. He dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker. Jim, he said when the line connected. It's Art Pinter. I have Garrison Ford here. There was a pause. Then a booming voice filled the room. Garrison Ford, the man who swore he would die before he let me pave over his rose garden. To what do I owe the pleasure? I leaned toward the phone. I am ready to sell Jim. Today. Silence. Then a cautious tone. You are kidding. You turned down $3 million last year. I am not looking for $3 million, I said, my voice steady. I am looking for speed. I will give it to you for $2 million flat. But there are conditions. I am listening, Jim said, and I could hear the greed in his voice. $2 million was a steal. The land alone was worth that. Condition 1, I said. Cash wire transfer. Today, before noon. Condition 2. You take possession immediately. As in today. Condition 3. And this is the deal breaker. I want the structure gone. I want you to bring your crew over right now and level it. I want the basement filled in. I want the driveway ripped up. I want it to look like a vacant lot by Friday. There was a long silence on the other end. "You want me to demo a $3 million house?" Jim asked slowly. "It is just wood and glass, Jim," I said. "The value is in the dirt. You are going to build condos there anyway. I am just saving you the trouble of feeling bad about it later. Do we have a deal?" I heard the sound of typing in the background. Jim was running the numbers. He was realizing he was getting the deal of the century. "If you can sign the deed over by 10 a.m., I can have the wire in your account by 11, Jim said. "And I can have a dozer there by noon. My boys are finishing a job in Bellevue. They can be there in 45 minutes. "Done," I said. I hung up the phone. Art looked at me. He looked at the binder. He looked at my face. "You are really doing this," he said softly. "You are wiping out 30 years of your life." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street. People were rushing to work, living their lives, worrying about their mortgages and their car payments. "I am not wiping it out, Art," I said. "I am saving it. If that house stands, it becomes a monument to their greed. It becomes a crime scene. It becomes the place where my daughter decided her father was worth less than a vacation. If I tear it down, I keep the memories. I keep the time I built the deck with Catherine. I keep the time we brought Vanessa home from the hospital. Those memories are in my head, not in the drywall." I turned back to him. "Draw up the papers, Art. Transfer the title from the trust to Westlake Development. Use the emergency clause. I am the grantor. I am the trustee. I have the power." Art nodded. He didn't argue anymore. He opened his laptop and started typing. The sound of the keys clacking was the only sound in the room. It sounded like a countdown. While he typed, I took out my phone. I had one more thing to check. I opened the banking app for the trust. The account was there, sitting quietly, earning interest. It was the account I had never told Vanessa about. She thought I lived on Social Security and a small pension. She didn't know about the investments Catherine and I had made in the 80s. She didn't know about the commercial properties I had bought and sold. Todd was borrowing $200,000 at 15% interest to steal a house he thought was my only asset. He didn't know he was trying to rob a bank vault with a plastic spoon. The printer in the corner whirred to life. Art pulled the fresh documents from the tray. He stapled them together. He placed them on the desk and handed me a pen. A heavy, expensive fountain pen. "Sign here," he said, pointing to the line. "And here. And initial here." I looked at the paper. "Quitclaim deed. Transfer of ownership. Garrison Ford trustee." I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. I signed my name. The ink flowed black and permanent. With each signature, I felt a chain breaking. I was cutting them loose. I was cutting myself free. Art took the papers. He scanned them. He emailed them to Jim at Westlake. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. "Incoming wire transfer, $1,000. Status completed." I looked at the number. It was a lot of zeros. It was freedom. "It is done," Art said. "The house is sold. Westlake owns it. You are trespassing if you go back there." I picked up my duffel bag. "I am not going back," I said. I left the keys on the counter. I left the garage door open for the crew. I walked to the door. "Where will you go?" Art asked. I touched the pocket where my passport was. "I am going to find a place where the sun shines and the phones don't ring," I said. "And Todd?" Art asked. "When he calls you." "And he will call you." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Tell him I am busy," I said. "Tell him I am doing some yard work." I walked out of the office. The sun was fully up now, piercing through the Seattle clouds. I hailed a taxi. "Take me to the airport," I told the driver. "International Terminal." As the taxi merged onto the highway, I looked back toward the lake one last time. I couldn't see the house from here, but in my mind's eye I saw the yellow excavators rolling up the driveway. I saw the steel teeth biting into the roof. I saw the walls collapsing. It wasn't destruction. It was sanitation. I sat back in the seat. I closed my eyes. Let the show begin. I sat in the leather chair across from Art Pinter and stared at the phone sitting in the center of the mahogany desk. It was a black conference phone, the kind with the spider-like legs that you see in boardrooms where companies are bought and gutted. My hand hovered over the keypad. I knew the number by heart. It belonged to Jim Westlake, the CEO of Westlake Development. For 20 years, Jim and I had been rivals. We were the two biggest contractors in King County. We fought over bids, we fought over subcontractors, and we fought over zoning variances. Last year, Jim had offered me $3 million for my property. He wanted to tear down my custom build and put up 3 luxury townhomes on the lot. I had told him to go to hell. I told him that house was my legacy. I told him I would die in that house. Well, things change. Legacies rot. And sometimes you have to make a deal with the devil to get out of hell. I punched in the number. I put it on speaker. It rang twice. Westlake here, a gruff voice answered. Jim didn't have a secretary screen his calls. He liked to be the first point of contact so he could smell the desperation on the other end. It is Garrison Ford, I said. There was a pause, a long silence where I could practically hear Jim calculating why I was calling. Garrison, Jim said finally, his voice cautious. I thought you were retired. Did you call to complain about my crew making noise down the street again? I am calling to sell, Jim, I said. The silence stretched longer this time. Selling, Jim repeated. You mean the lake house? The one you said you would burn down before you let me touch it? That is the one. I waited. In negotiation, the first person to fill the silence usually loses money. $3 million, Jim said. That was the offer last year. The market has cooled, Garrison. Interest rates are up. I can maybe do 2.6. Maybe. And that is a 30-day close pending inspection. I do not have 30 days, I said. I do not have 3 days. I need to close today. Today, Jim laughed. A harsh barking sound. Garrison, you know how this works. Title search, escrow, inspections. I can't move that kind of money in 24 hours. You can, I said, cutting him off. I know you, Jim. I know you keep a liquidity fund for distressed assets. I know you bought the Henderson lot last month for cash on the Barrelhead because they were facing foreclosure. I am offering you the same deal. I leaned closer to the speakerphone. $2 million flat, I said. That is $500,000 under market value. But I have conditions. I could hear the greed shifting gears in Jim's brain. $500,000 in instant equity was a lot of money even for him. I am listening, Jim said. What conditions? Condition 1, I said. Cash wire transfer. The money has to be in the Ford family trust account by noon today. Not a check, not a promise. A wire. Done, Jim said immediately. $2 million is heavy, but for that lot it is a steal. What else? Condition 2, I said. And this is the deal breaker. I want possession transferred immediately upon receipt of funds. And I want the structure demolished. Demolished, Jim asked. You want me to tear it down? I want it erased, I said. I want you to bring your heaviest equipment over there the second the ink is dry. I want the foundation dug up. I want the framing splintered. I want the site cleared down to the dirt. I want it to look like a vacant lot by Friday morning. Why, Jim asked. His voice had lost the negotiator's edge. Now he just sounded confused. Garrison, that is a custom build. You spent 3 years on that trim work. Why do you want me to destroy it? Because it is infected, I said. Infected, Jim asked. With what? Mold, asbestos. With memories, I said. Bad ones. I looked at Art Pinter. He was watching me with a look of profound sadness, but he nodded, encouraging me to continue. Listen, Jim, I continued, my voice hardening. You do not care about the house. You never did. You want the dirt. You want the footprint. You want to build your condos. The house is just an obstacle. It is just 50 tons of wood and glass standing in the way of your profit margin. I am giving you permission to skip the preservation review. I am giving you permission to skip the salvage. Just crush it. So you are selling me the land for $2 million, and you are throwing in a free demolition permit, Jim clarified. Exactly, I said. But it has to happen now. Today. If that house is standing on Friday, the deal is void. Jim was silent for a moment, running the numbers. He was a shark, but he was a practical shark. He knew the value of waterfront property in Seattle. The dirt was the gold. The house was just the wrapper. Why the rush? Garrison Jim asked quietly. Is it the kids? He knew about Vanessa. Everyone in the industry knew about Vanessa. They knew she was the reason I had worked until I was 70. They knew she was the reason I had gray hair. Let's just say I am cleaning up my estate, I said. And I want to make sure there is nothing left to fight over. I get it, Xiang said. I have an ex-wife like that. Scorched earth. So do we have a deal, I asked? I heard the sound of the heavy chair shifting. I heard the click of a pen. I will have the wire prepped in 10 minutes, Jim said. Send over the title and the trust documents to my attorney. I will have a crew there by 1 o'clock. They are finishing up a teardown in Bellevue. I will redirect them. 1 o'clock, I said. Do not be late, Jim. I won't. And Garrison. Yeah. I always liked that house. It was good work. It was, I said. But good work doesn't last forever. I hung up the phone. The room was silent again. The deal was done. In a matter of minutes, I had liquidated 30 years of my life. I had turned my home into a number on a balance sheet. Art Pinter exhaled a long breath. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with his tie. You just sold a $3 million asset for $2 million, Art said. Todd is going to lose his mind. That is the point, Art, I said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. Todd thinks he has leverage. He thinks he has equity. He thinks he is borrowing against a tangible asset. I turned back to face the lawyer. But hard money lenders have strict criteria, Art. They need a first position lien on the property. They need collateral. On Friday, when that loan shark tries to record his lien against the title, he is going to find out that the title has already transferred. He is going to find out that the property he thought he was securing doesn't belong to Todd Miller or Garrison Ford anymore. It belongs to Westlake Development. And since I am the sole trustee, Art added, catching on a small smile playing on his lips. And since you never signed the power of attorney, Todd committed fraud when he applied for that loan. He pledged an asset he didn't own and didn't have the authority to pledge. Exactly, I said. When the lender finds out the collateral is gone, the deal collapses. Todd doesn't get his $200,000. He doesn't get to pay off his bookie. And he doesn't get to put me in a nursing home because he won't have the money to pay the admission fee. It is brutal, Art said. It is necessary, I replied. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from my bank app. I picked it up. Pending incoming wire, Westlake Development, LLC. Amount $2,000. Jim moved fast. He wasn't taking any chances either. I showed the screen to Art. The money is there, I said. Print the deed, Art. Let us make it official. Art printed the documents. The whir of the laser printer was the only sound in the room. I signed my name, Garrison Ford Trustee, over and over again. With every signature, I felt lighter. I wasn't losing a home. I was shedding a skin. Once the papers were signed, scanned, and emailed to Jim's lawyers, I stood up. "I need to go meet the crew," I said. "I need to open the gate." "You are going back there?" Art asked. "One last time," I said. "I need to make sure they do it right. I do not want them saving the cabinets. I do not want them salvaging the copper. I want it all gone." I picked up my duffel bag. It contained everything I owned now. My clothes, my wife's ashes, my passport, $2 million in the bank, and a reservation on a flight to Rome. "Garrison," Art said, standing up and extending his hand. "You are a hell of a contractor." I shook his hand. His grip was firm. "I am just doing a renovation, Art," I said. "A total gut job. Sometimes you have to take it down to the studs to get rid of the rot." I walked out of the office and hailed a cab. The ride back to the house felt surreal. I looked at the city passing by, the cranes building new glass towers, the traffic clogging the arteries of commerce. It all felt distant, like I was watching it on a screen. When the taxi pulled up to the gate of my house, my former house, I saw that Jim was a man of his word. The street was lined with heavy equipment. A flatbed truck was unloading a massive excavator with a hydraulic claw. A bulldozer was idling its diesel engine, rumbling like a beast waiting to be unleashed. The neighbors were out on their porches watching. Mrs. Higgins from next door was peering through her blinds. They probably thought I was finally doing that remodel Vanessa had always talked about. They had no idea I was performing an amputation. I paid the driver and walked up the driveway. The foreman, a burly man named Mike, whom I had known for years, was waiting for me. He looked confused. "Garrison," he said, tipping his hard hat. "Jim said total demo. Said you sold it for dirt. Is that right?" "That is right, Mike," I said. "Everything goes?" Mike asked, looking at the house. "The windows, the roof, the deck, everything," I said. Mike kicked the dirt with his boot. "It is a shame, Garrison. It is a solid build. Good bones. The bones are cancer, Mike," I said. "Crush it." I unlocked the front door for the last time. I walked through the empty rooms. The air was stale. I saw the ghost of my life here. Catherine laughing in the kitchen. Vanessa taking her first steps in the hallway. Todd sitting on my couch drinking my beer, acting like he owned the place. I walked out the back door and stood on the deck. The lake was shimmering in the afternoon sun. I checked my watch. It was 1 o'clock. In Hawaii, it was 10 in the morning. Todd and Vanessa were probably at breakfast ordering mimosas and eggs Benedict, thinking about how smart they were. Thinking about Friday. Friday was going to be a very bad day for them. I walked back to the front of the house. Mike was in the cab of the excavator. He looked at me for the signal. I didn't wave. I just nodded. The engine roared. The hydraulic arm lifted high into the air, the steel claw opening like a predator's mouth. It swung toward the house. It struck the roof of the master bedroom first. The sound was incredible. A crunch of timber and shingles that echoed off the hills. Glass shattered. Drywall exploded in a cloud of white dust. I watched as the claw ripped through the wall, exposing the room where Todd and Vanessa slept. I saw their bed frame twist and snap. I saw the closet where Vanessa kept her clothes collapse into the yard. It was violent. It was loud. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I watched for 10 minutes as the machine tore into the structure. The living room ceiling caved in. The kitchen walls buckled. The house I had built was being unmade piece by piece. I turned away. I didn't need to see the end. I knew Mike would finish the job. By tomorrow, there would be nothing left but a hole in the ground. I walked down the driveway, past the gaping neighbors, past the idling trucks. I didn't look back. I had a plane to catch. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just taking care of the house. I was taking care of myself. Before the first pane of glass shattered, and before Mike dropped the hydraulic claw onto the roof of the master bedroom, I had one final piece of business to attend to. You do not demolish a building with the furniture still inside. It is messy, and frankly, it is wasteful. I am a builder, not a vandal. An hour before the heavy machinery arrived, I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the artifacts of my daughter and son-in-law's borrowed life. The room looked like a showroom for people who have more credit cards than sense. There was a curved organic light emitting diode television that spanned half the wall. There were sculptures that looked like twisted metal coat hangers, which Vanessa claimed were art, but I knew were just expensive dust collectors. I looked at my watch. I had 45 minutes before the excavators rolled in. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I had looked up the night before. It was the dispatch line for the City Mission, a local charity that helped the homeless and those getting back on their feet. I have a donation, I told the dispatcher when she answered. A large one. Clothing, electronics, furniture, high-end goods. But there is a catch. You need a truck here in 20 minutes. The dispatcher hesitated, telling me their schedule was full, but when I mentioned the brand names Gucci, Prada, Sony, Apple, her tone changed. She said she would divert a truck immediately. While I waited, I went upstairs to the master suite. This was the room I had built for Catherine and me. It had the best view of the lake. Now it smelled of Todd's cologne and Vanessa's floral perfume, a scent that was too sweet and lingered too long. I opened the walk-in closet. It was packed. Vanessa had hundreds of pairs of shoes lined up on racks like soldiers. Todd had suits he never wore because he didn't have a job to go to. I grabbed a pile of black contractor bags from my back pocket and snapped one open. I started with Todd's side. I grabbed armfuls of Italian wool suits and silk ties. I didn't bother folding them. I stuffed them into the bag with the same care I would give to insulation scraps. I found his collection of watches, mostly fakes, I suspected, and swept them into a shoebox. I found his gaming console, the one he spent hours on while pretending to be networking for real estate deals, and tossed it into a bag along with the controllers and headsets. Then I moved to Vanessa's side. This was harder. I held up a dress, a silver sequined thing she had worn to a gala last year. She had looked beautiful in it. For a second, I saw my little girl, the one who used to wear overalls and help me paint the fence. But then I remembered her voice at the airport telling me I was too old to fly. I remembered the email where she agreed to put me in a lockdown ward to avoid feeling guilty. I dropped the dress into the bag. I cleared the shelves. Handbags, belts, scarves. I stripped the room bare. I moved fast, fueled by a cold adrenaline. I wasn't stealing. I was the owner of the house. Anything left inside was abandoned property. They had left for 2 weeks without securing their assets. That was negligence. By the time the City Mission truck rumbled up the driveway, I had 12 massive black bags lined up in the foyer. The driver, a young man with tattoos on his neck and a kind face, looked at the pile with wide eyes. All this, he asked. All of it, I said. And the TV, and the stereo system. Take it all. If you can't fit it, come back for a second load, but do it fast. This house won't be here in an hour. He didn't ask questions. He and his partner started hauling the bags. They treated the stuff better than I did. To them, this was a gold mine. To me, it was just debris. I watched them load the truck. I felt a grim satisfaction, knowing that Todd's $1,000 suits would soon be worn by men who were actually looking for work. I knew Vanessa's designer shoes would go to women who walked miles every day just to survive. It was the first honest thing that had happened in this house in years. As the charity truck pulled away, fully loaded, a blue and white police cruiser turned onto the street. It slowed down as it approached my driveway. I saw the lights flash, once a silent signal. My neighbor, Mrs. Higgins. She must have been watching through her blinds, seeing the frantic activity, the large truck, the black bags. She probably thought I was being robbed, or worse, that the senile old man had finally snapped. The cruiser stopped blocking the driveway. An officer stepped out. I didn't recognize him. He was young, confident, with his hand resting near his belt. He walked up the driveway, scanning the yard, the open front door, the bags I hadn't managed to give away yet. Sir, Are you okay? The officer asked, his eyes moving from me to the house. We got a call about a disturbance, suspicious activity, large trucks removing property. I stood on the porch. I was wearing my work clothes, my boots muddy, my flannel shirt dusted with drywall powder. I looked like a squatter or a thief. I am fine, officer, I said, keeping my hands visible. Just doing some spring cleaning. The officer walked closer. He looked at the empty foyer behind me. That looks like a lot more than spring cleaning, sir. Is this your residence? It is, I said. Can I see some identification? And proof of ownership if you have it. We have a report that the homeowners are on vacation in Hawaii. Of course, Mrs. Higgins. She knew Vanessa's schedule. She knew they were gone. She thought I was the help, or the confused father, who was supposed to be watering the plants, not liquidating the estate. I reached into my back pocket slowly, so as not to startle him. I pulled out my wallet and the folded deed I had just signed with Pinter. My name is Garrison Ford, I said, handing him my driver's license. I built this house 30 years ago, and as of this morning, I am the sole trustee and owner of the property. The officer looked at the license. He looked at the deed. He read the legal description. He looked back at me. The tension in his shoulders dropped a fraction. Mr. Ford, he said, handing the papers back. My apologies. The neighbor was concerned. She said your daughter lives here. She did, I corrected him using the past tense deliberately. She moved out. Today. The officer looked around at the empty yard. He saw the heavy equipment from Westlake Development starting to stage at the bottom of the hill. And the construction crew, he asked. Demolition, I said. I am tearing it down. The officer's eyebrows shot up. You are tearing down a perfectly good house. It has structural issues, I said. Deep rot. It is safer to bring it down. He looked at me for a long moment. He was a cop. He knew when someone was lying, but he also knew when someone was telling a truth that was none of his business. He saw the look in my eye. It wasn't the look of a criminal. It was the look of a man who was done negotiating. All right, Mr. Ford, he said, touching the brim of his cap. It is your property. Just keep the noise down after 5. I will be gone by 5, I said. The officer turned and walked back to his cruiser. I watched him drive away. Mrs. Higgins was probably having a heart attack behind her curtains right now. I turned back to the house. The charity truck was gone. The police were gone. It was just me and the machine now. Mike the foreman waved from the cab of the excavator. He pointed to his watch. It was time. I picked up my small duffel bag. It was light. It contained only the things that mattered. A photo album of Catherine and me from our honeymoon in Italy. Her silver hairbrush, which I had kept on the vanity for 10 years. My passport. And the checkbook for the trust account. I walked down the stairs. I walked past the rose bushes that lined the front walkway. Vanessa loved those roses. She used to post pictures of them on social media with captions like, "My sanctuary" and "Home sweet home." She never watered them. She never pruned them. She just used them as a backdrop for her vanity. I stopped in front of the bushes. They were in full bloom, deep red and velvety. I reached out and touched a petal. It was soft. I am sorry, I whispered. I looked up at Mike. I pointed at the roses. Start there, I shouted over the idle of the engine. Take the hedge out first. Mike nodded. He manipulated the controls. The massive yellow machine pivoted on its tracks. The steel bucket swung low, hovering inches above the flowers. I didn't turn away. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. The bucket dropped. It bit into the earth with a sickening crunch. Roots snapped. Soil flew. In one violent motion, the entire hedge was ripped from the ground. The red petals scattered into the air, like confetti mixing with the dust. The sanctuary was gone. The backdrop was erased. It was shocking how easy it was. 30 years of growth gone in 3 seconds. The excavator turned, dropping the mangled bushes into the back of the dump truck. Then it turned back toward the house. The bucket raised higher this time, aiming for the front porch. The porch where I had sat with Catherine. The porch where I had smoked my pipe and watched the rain. The steel teeth slammed into the roof of the porch. Wood splintered. The support columns buckled. The roof collapsed with a roar that shook the ground beneath my feet. Dust billowed out a white cloud that engulfed the front of the house. When it cleared, the front door was gone. The foyer was exposed like an open wound. I could see the staircase leading up to nowhere. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It was release. It was the feeling of a heavy pack being dropped after a long march. I turned my back on the house. I heard the machine strike again and again, a rhythmic pounding that sounded like a heartbeat. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel. I walked past the for sale sign that Todd had hidden in the garage, planning to put it up on Friday. I had found it and tossed it into the dumpster. A yellow taxi was waiting for me at the end of the street. I had called it 10 minutes ago. The driver was leaning against the hood, watching the demolition, with his mouth open. "That is a hell of a thing to watch," he said, as I approached. Somebody must have really hated that house. I opened the back door and tossed my bag inside. "No," I said. "I loved that house. That is why I couldn't let it stand." I got in. The leather seat was cool. The air conditioning was humming. It was quiet inside the car, insulated from the violence outside. "Where to?" the driver asked. "SeaTac Airport," I said. "International departures." The driver pulled away. As we rounded the corner, I looked out the rear window. The excavator was tearing into the living room now. The roof was sagging. The house looked like it was bowing down, surrendering. I sat back and closed my eyes. I didn't see the destruction anymore. I saw the future. I saw a piazza in Rome. I saw a glass of wine. I saw a phone ringing with a call I wouldn't answer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I went to the settings. I found the contact for Vanessa. I found the contact for Todd. I didn't block them. That would be too easy. I wanted to see the calls. I wanted to see the desperation. I wanted to see the moment they realized the ground had shifted beneath their feet. I put the phone back in my pocket. "Step on it," I told the driver. "I have a flight to catch, and I am not too old to fly." The cabin of the Boeing 707 was a world away from the dust and noise of the demolition site. Here, the air smelled of filtered oxygen and expensive leather. I sat in seat 1A, a window seat, in the first-class cabin. It was a pod really private, and enclosed with a seat that lay flat into a bed. I had never flown first class in my life. I had always flown coach, saving the money for the house for Vanessa's tuition for a rainy day. Well, it was raining now, and I was finally using the umbrella. A flight attendant with a perfect smile and a uniform that didn't have a speck of dust on it leaned over the partition. "Mr. Ford, would you like a glass of champagne before takeoff?" she asked. I looked at her. I looked at my hands, which were scrubbed clean but still felt rough from years of work. "I will take a red wine," I said. "The most expensive Italian red you have open." She returned a moment later with a glass of Barolo. I took a sip. It tasted like earth and dark fruit. It tasted like victory. I reclined the seat slightly. The plane began its pushback from the gate. I felt the vibration of the engines thrumming through the floor. It was a massive power, a force capable of lifting hundreds of tons into the sky. I felt a kinship with it. I had just exerted a force of my own. As we taxied to the runway, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had turned it off during the ride to the airport. But now I wanted to see the fallout. I wanted to see the blast radius. I turned it on and connected to the plane's Wi-Fi network. The phone convulsed in my hand. It didn't just vibrate, it buzzed continuously, a frantic staccato rhythm that lasted for nearly a full minute. The notifications cascaded down the screen in a blur of white boxes. 55 missed calls, 120 text messages, 14 voicemails. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't feel a spike of anxiety. I felt the cool detachment of a judge reading a verdict. I started scrolling through the messages, starting from the bottom, the oldest ones first. I wanted to trace the timeline of their panic. The first message was from Vanessa, sent at 11:30 a.m. Seattle time. That would have been just as the excavator arrived. Dad, Mrs. Higgins just called me. She says there are big trucks in the driveway. Did the pool guy show up early? I took another sip of wine. Poor Mrs. Higgins. She must have been glued to her window. The next message was 10 minutes later. Dad, answer the phone. Mrs. Higgins sent me a picture. There is a bulldozer on the lawn. What is going on? Then the tone shifted. Panic started to set in. Dad, pick up. Why is there a hole in the roof? Mrs. Higgins says they are tearing it down. Tell them to stop. I could hear her voice in the all-caps text. I could hear that shrill, demanding tone she used when a waiter got her order wrong. But this wasn't a wrong order. This was her inheritance being turned into mulch. Then Todd entered this chat. His messages were less hysterical and more threatening. He was realizing the financial implications. Garrison, answer me right now. I am looking at a live feed from the neighbor. You do not have the authority to do this. That house is collateral. Stop the machines or I call the police. I chuckled softly. Collateral. He still thought he had a deal. He didn't realize that by the time he sent that text, the deal was already dead. I scrolled up. The messages became a stream of consciousness nightmare. Vanessa. We are trying to get a flight back. There are no seats until tomorrow. Dad, please tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you are just doing a renovation. Todd. I called the cops, Garrison. They said they talked to you. They said you showed them a deed. What deed? You are senile. I will have you committed. Do you hear me? You are going to rot in a cell. Vanessa, the whole second floor is gone. Dad, my clothes are in there. My jewelry, my wedding dress. How could you? Todd, Vinny is calling me Garrison. You have no idea what you have done. You killed us. You literally killed us. I paused at that one. You killed us. No, Todd. I didn't kill you. I just took away the life jacket you stole from me. You jumped into the ocean with a shark. That is on you. The plane accelerated down the runway. The force pressed me back into the soft leather seat. I watched the ground rush by outside the window. The gray tarmac, the rain-slicked runway, the hangars. Then the nose lifted and the ground fell away. We punched through the low-hanging clouds, and suddenly there was only blue sky and sunlight. I looked back at the phone. The messages were still coming in, even as we climbed. Missed call Vanessa. Missed call Vanessa. Missed call Todd. They were frantic. They were trapped in paradise watching their future disintegrate via text message updates from a nosy neighbor. They were powerless. For 3 years they had held all the power. They had the youth. They had the energy. They had the audacity. They treated me like a ghost in my own home. Now I was the one haunting them. I opened my voicemail. I played the most recent one from Todd. I held the phone to my ear, sipping my wine as the Pacific Northwest disappeared beneath a blanket of white clouds. Garrison. Todd's voice was distorted by wind and rage. He sounded like he was screaming into the phone at an airport terminal. You listen to me, you old fool. You can't sell that house. I have a contract. I have money tied up in this. If that house isn't standing on Friday, I am a dead man. Do you understand? Dead. You better tell them to stop digging. I will sue you. I will. I will. The message cut off. He must have run out of breath or smashed his phone. I will sue you. Good luck with that, Todd. You can't sue a trust for disposing of its own assets. You can't sue a man for demolishing a house he owns free and clear. You can try, but by the time the paperwork makes it through the courts, I will be drinking espresso in a piazza, and you will be explaining to Vinny why his 200 grand turned into a pile of splinters. I deleted the voicemail. I deleted them all. I didn't save them. I didn't need to hear their voices anymore. I had the memory of the excavator claw ripping through the roof. That was the only sound I needed. I opened my contact list. I found Vanessa's name. I hovered my finger over the block button, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Blocking them would be a mercy. It would give them silence. I wanted them to have doubt. I wanted them to send messages into the void, wondering if I was reading them, wondering where I was, wondering how the senile old man had outmaneuvered them so completely. I turned off the notifications. I placed the phone face down on the tray table. The flight attendant returned. "Is everything all right, Mr. Ford?" she asked, noticing my intense focus on the blank screen. I looked up at her. For the first time in a long time, my eyes felt clear. My chest felt light. The crushing weight of the last 3 years, the insults, the neglect, the fear of Sunnyside, it was all gone. Left behind in the rubble on Lakeview Drive. "Everything is perfect," I said. "I am just enjoying the quiet." "We will be serving dinner in an hour," she said. "We have a prime rib or a lobster thermidor." "I will have the lobster," I said, "and another glass of this wine." "Of course." She walked away. I looked out the window. The sky was darkening into a deep indigo as we flew east-west toward the night. I was flying into the sunrise. I was 72 years old, and I was homeless. I had no address. I had no car. I had no furniture. And I had never felt more at home. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the engines. They sounded like a lullaby. Beneath me, the world continued to turn. Somewhere down there, my daughter was crying over a closet full of shoes that were currently being sorted by a homeless shelter volunteer. Somewhere down there, my son-in-law was sweating through his shirt, realizing that the hard money he wanted was about to become very hard indeed. I took a deep breath. "You are too old to fly, Dad," she had said. I smiled into the empty cabin. "Watch me soar, honey. Watch me soar." I was sitting in a cafe in Rome watching the rain streak against the cobblestones when I imagined their return. I did not need a crystal ball to see it. I had the flight tracking data and the detailed report from Mrs. Higgins, who had positioned herself on her front porch with a thermos of tea and a pair of binoculars. She told me later that it was the best show she had seen since the Carter administration. It had been 2 weeks since I boarded my flight. 2 weeks of silence from my end, and 2 weeks of absolute chaos on theirs. They had been stuck in Hawaii not because they wanted to extend their vacation, but because their credit cards had been declined at the hotel checkout. They had been forced to call Vanessa's mother, my first wife's sister, who hated me almost as much as she hated lending money to beg for airfare home. They landed at SeaTac Airport at 4:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was raining in Seattle, a cold, gray drizzle that soaked into your bones. They walked to the parking garage to retrieve the Range Rover Todd loved so much. He pressed the unlock button on his key fob, expecting the lights to flash. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Nothing. They wandered the rows of the garage for 20 minutes, dragging their heavy designer luggage until they found the spot where they had parked. The space was empty. Todd called the airport police, thinking it was stolen. The officer on the line probably checked the license plate and gave him the bad news. It wasn't stolen. It was repossessed. The lease was in my name, but I had stopped the automatic payments the day I left. The leasing company didn't waste time. They had come with a tow truck and a court order. So there they were standing on the concrete, soaking wet, broke and stranded. They had to take a taxi. Not an Uber Black, not a limousine. A beat-up yellow cab with a driver who didn't care about their tan lines or their attitude. The ride to Lakeview Drive takes about 40 minutes in traffic. I can picture the inside of that cab. Vanessa staring out the window, her face tight with a mixture of rage and fear, clutching her phone that I still hadn't answered. Todd sitting next to her, sweating, despite the cold, tapping his foot, checking his watch, checking his messages, praying for a miracle that wasn't coming. They turned onto our street just as the sun was beginning to set behind the storm clouds. The neighborhood was quiet. The manicured lawns of the other houses were green and perfect. And then the taxi slowed down. "Driver, are you lost?" Todd snapped, his voice cracking. "This is the right street, but I do not recognize the—" He stopped. The taxi driver pulled over to the curb and put the car in park. He turned around. "Buddy, the GPS says this is the address," he said, pointing through the rain-slicked windshield. "But there is no house here." Vanessa looked up. She looked out the window. And then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of disbelief. A scream of a mind shattering against a reality it refused to accept. She scrambled out of the taxi, not even waiting for it to stop completely. She ran across the sidewalk, her heels sinking into the mud. Where my house had stood for 30 years, there was now a hole. It was a perfect rectangular void in the earth. The demolition crew had been thorough. They hadn't just knocked down the walls. They had dug up the foundation. They had removed the pipes. They had filled the basement cavity with gravel and smoothed it over. It looked like a construction site that hadn't been touched in years. A chain-link fence surrounded the property. Zip-tied to the fence was a large metal sign. It was blue and white. It read, "Westlake Development. Coming soon. Luxury waterfront condos. No trespassing." Vanessa grabbed the chain-link fence with both hands, shaking it violently. "No," she shrieked. "No, no, no, my house! Where is my house?" She looked like a madwoman. Her hair was frizzy from the humidity. Her expensive vacation clothes were getting splattered with mud. She looked around frantically, as if the house might be hiding behind a tree. Todd got out of the taxi slowly. He walked toward the fence like a man walking to the electric chair. He didn't look at the hole in the ground. He looked at the sign. Westlake Development. He knew that name. Everyone in Seattle real estate knew that name. Jim Westlake didn't partner. He acquired. He devoured. Todd fell to his knees in the mud. He didn't scream. He just stared at the sign, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. He did the math in his head. The loan shark Vinny expected a title transfer on Friday. It was now Tuesday, 2 weeks later. Todd had been dodging Vinny's calls for 14 days, telling him there were delays with the paperwork, telling him the old man was being difficult, telling him the asset was secure. He had promised a $200,000 lien on a property that no longer existed. He had borrowed money against a ghost. Vanessa turned on him. She started hitting his chest with her fists. "You said you handled it," she screamed. "You said you talked to the appraiser. You said everything was fine." "Where is my bedroom, Todd? Where are my clothes? Where are my shoes? My shoes?" Even in the face of total devastation, she was worried about her footwear. Todd pushed her away weakly. "Shut up, Vanessa," he hissed, his eyes wild. "Do you not understand? It is gone. He sold it. The crazy old bastard sold it and tore it down. He grabbed the fence, his knuckles white. How did he do this? I had the emails. I had the loan approved." The taxi driver honked his horn. He rolled down the window. "Hey folks, the meter is running. Are you paying or what?" Todd checked his pockets. He pulled out a wallet that was empty of cash and full of maxed-out credit cards. He looked at Vanessa. She glared back at him. "I do not have any money," she spat. "You spent the last of the cash on duty-free vodka." They had to endure the final humiliation of having the taxi driver threaten to call the police before Todd gave him his fake Rolex as collateral just to get him to leave. The taxi drove off, leaving them standing in the rain with their Louis Vuitton luggage and no place to go. That was when Mrs. Higgins came out. She walked down her driveway holding a large umbrella. She didn't offer to share it. She stood on her side of the property line, safe and dry. "Hello, Vanessa," she called out. "Hello, Todd. You are back early." Vanessa ran toward her. "Mrs. Higgins, you have to help us. Call the police. Someone stole our house, my dad. Something happened to my dad. He must have been kidnapped." Mrs. Higgins shook her head, sipping from a mug of tea. "Nobody kidnapped him, dear. He left in a taxi 2 weeks ago. He looked very dapper. He was wearing a nice suit." "Where did he go?" Vanessa demanded, gripping Mrs. Higgins's fence. "He said he was going to the airport," Mrs. Higgins replied calmly. "He said he was going to catch a flight. He mentioned Rome. Or maybe it was Paris. Somewhere with better wine than here." "Rome," Todd whispered. "He is in Rome." Mrs. Higgins reached into her pocket. "Oh, he left a message for you." "Well, not a message exactly. He told me to tell you something if you came back looking for him." What? Vanessa asked, her eyes wide with a desperate hope. "Did he leave a key? Did he leave money?" Mrs. Higgins smiled. It was a smile that had been brewing for 3 years of watching them treat me like a servant. "He said to tell you that the grass does not need watering anymore." Vanessa froze. Her face crumbled. "And he said to tell you, Todd." Mrs. Higgins continued, turning her gaze to my son-in-law, "that the mailman came by yesterday. He was looking for you. He had a certified letter. From a Mr. Vinny K. It sounded important. He said something about a final notice." Todd made a sound that was half whimper, half choke. He scrambled backward, away from the fence, away from Mrs. Higgins, as if she were the one threatening him. "Vinny knows," he gasped. "He knows I am back." At that exact moment, Todd's phone began to ring. It was in his pocket, but the sound seemed to echo in the empty street. It was a loud, jarring ringtone. Todd pulled it out. He looked at the screen. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wet chalk. "It is him," he whispered. "It is Vinny." "Answer it," Vanessa said, her voice trembling. "Tell him. Tell him we have the house. Tell him it is just a renovation." Todd looked at the hole in the ground. He looked at the massive pile of dirt where the living room used to be. "I can't," he said. "I can't tell him that. He will come here. He will see." The phone kept ringing. Todd looked at Vanessa. "We have to go," he said. "We have to run. Go where Vanessa screamed. We have no car. We have no money. We have no house." "I do not know," Todd yelled back. "Anywhere before he sends his guys." He grabbed his suitcase. He started running down the street, dragging the heavy bag behind him, the wheels clattering on the wet pavement. He didn't look back at his wife. He didn't look back at the property. He just ran. Vanessa stood there alone. She looked at the empty lot. She looked at Mrs. Higgins, who just took another sip of tea and turned off her porch light, leaving Vanessa in the dark. She pulled out her phone. She dialed my number for the 56th time. I watched the screen of my phone light up in the cafe in Rome. "Incoming call, Vanessa." I let it ring. I took a bite of my tiramisu. It was sweet and bitter, just like the moment. I watched the call go to voicemail. Vanessa finally dropped her phone to her side. She sank down onto her suitcase in the rain, right there on the sidewalk in front of the mud pit that used to be her inheritance. She put her head in her hands and wailed. It was a sound of total defeat. She had told me to take care of the house. I had taken care of it perfectly. I had cleaned it up. I had removed the trash. And now the lot was ready for something new, something better, something that wasn't built on a foundation of ungratefulness and greed. The rain kept falling in Seattle, washing away the last traces of the Ford family home. But in Rome, the sun was just starting to rise. The morning sun in Rome hit the Piazza Navona with a golden light that seemed almost unreal. I sat at a small iron table near the Fountain of the Four Rivers, nursing a double espresso and watching the tourists take photos. It was 10:00 a.m. in Italy, which meant it was 1:00 a.m. in Seattle. My phone sat on the white tablecloth like a grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. I had ignored 55 calls, but now it was time to answer just one. I needed to close the loop. I needed to sign off on the project. I unlocked the screen and pressed the video call button for Vanessa. She picked up on the first ring. The image was grainy and dark, lit only by a street lamp. She was sitting on her suitcase in the rain, her hair plastered to her skull, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. Behind her, I could see the chain-link fence and the dark void where her inheritance used to be. "Dad," she screamed, and the audio clipped with distortion. "Dad, where are you? Why did you do this? My clothes, my life. It is all gone." I took a sip of espresso. It was rich and strong. "Hello, Vanessa," I said calmly. "I hope you enjoyed Hawaii. I heard the weather was nice." She stared at the camera, her mouth agape. "Hawaii. You destroyed my house while we were in Hawaii. You are sick. You are absolutely sick. I am going to have you locked up. I am going to tell everyone you are insane." "It was not your house, Vanessa," I said, my voice level and cold. "It never was. It was my house. I built it. I paid for it. And I decided I did not like the tenant, so I evicted him." Todd shoved his face into the frame. He looked like a cornered rat. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was shaking. "Garrison, you listen to me," he hissed. "You committed fraud. You sold a property that was under contract. I had a deal. I had $200,000 coming on Friday. You stole that from me. Vinny is going to kill me. Do you understand? He is going to kill me." I leaned back in my chair, letting the sounds of the Roman morning filter through the microphone. "I did not steal anything, Todd. You tried to mortgage a property you did not own using a power of attorney I never signed. That is called mortgage fraud. That is a federal crime. And as for Vinny, well, that sounds like a personal problem. Maybe you should have used your own money to gamble instead of betting my life." Todd turned pale. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew about the loan." "I know everything," I said. "I know about the gambling. I know about the debt. And I know about Sunnyside. I know about Section D." Vanessa flinched. She looked away from the camera, unable to meet my eyes even digitally. "You were going to put me in a lockdown ward." "Vanessa," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the static. "You were going to drug me and let me rot, so you could buy handbags and stay in 5-star hotels. You told Todd to make it clean because you did not want to feel guilty. Well, do not worry, honey. You do not have to feel guilty anymore. You have nothing left to feel guilty about." "Dad." "Please," Vanessa sobbed. "We have nowhere to go. Our cards are declined. The car is gone. We are on the street. Please just wire us some money. Just enough for a hotel. Just for tonight." I looked at her. I looked for a shred of the little girl who used to hold my hand, but she was gone. She had been consumed by the monster she married and the greed she nurtured. "I am not an ATM, Vanessa," I said. "I am your father. Or I was. But fathers protect their children, and children respect their parents. You broke the contract." "But what do we do?" she wailed. "You get a job," I said. "You work, you save, you build your own house, and maybe in 30 years you will understand what it feels like to have someone try to take it away from you." I moved my thumb to the red button. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I said. "Wait!" Todd screamed. "Wait, Garrison, please." I ended the call. The screen went black. I put the phone down and signaled the waiter for the check. I felt a profound sense of finality. The demolition was complete. The debris had been cleared. The fallout in Seattle happened fast, faster than even I expected. Without the house as collateral, Todd's house of cards collapsed in days. The loan shark Vinny didn't break his legs. He did something worse. He tipped off the police about Todd's fraudulent loan application and his wire fraud schemes. Vinny didn't want the heat of a murder investigation, so he let the justice system do the dirty work. Todd was arrested at a motel 6 days later. He was charged with multiple counts of bank fraud and identity theft. I saw his mugshot on the internet. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed with his complexion. He was looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. He would have plenty of time to read those self-help books now. Vanessa fared differently. She wasn't charged, but she was destitute. The creditors took everything that wasn't nailed down. She tried to sue me, of course. She found a lawyer who worked on contingency and filed a suit claiming I was mentally incompetent and that the sale of the house was invalid. Art Pinter crushed them in a single hearing. He presented the trust documents, the medical records from Dr. Patel certifying my perfect mental health, and the video footage of Vanessa standing in the rain screaming about her shoes. The judge threw the case out with prejudice and ordered Vanessa to pay my legal fees. Since she had no money, she had to declare bankruptcy. The last I heard, Vanessa was working the drive-through window at a fast food joint in Renton. A friend of mine sent me a picture. She was wearing a paper hat and a headset, handing a bag of grease-stained burgers to a customer in a minivan. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like someone who finally understood the value of $1 because she had to stand on her feet for 8 hours to earn 10 of them. As for Mia, I kept my word. I set up an educational trust for her. It is locked tight. Neither Todd nor Vanessa can touch a cent of it. It pays directly to the university. If Mia can break away from her parents' toxicity, she has a future. If she chooses to follow them, she gets nothing. It is her choice. That is more than I ever got. I stayed in Rome for 3 months, then moved to Tuscany. I rented a small villa on a hill overlooking a vineyard. It is quiet here. The air is clean. I spend my days walking, reading, and learning Italian. I am not lonely. I have the memories of Catherine, and they are happier now that they aren't housed in a place that was being poisoned. I used a portion of the money to establish the Catherine Ford Scholarship for Architecture and Design. It helps kids who want to build things, kids who know how to use their hands and their sons. Every year, I fly back to present the award. I fly first class. I wear a nice suit. And I never visit Lakeview Drive. Sometimes when I am sitting on my terrace watching the sun set over the Italian hills, I think about that morning in the driveway. I think about the Uber and the luggage and the way they looked at me like I was a piece of furniture they were putting in storage. They made one fatal mistake. They looked at my gray hair and my slow walk, and they saw weakness. They didn't see the steel that holds the building up. They didn't see the foundation. They thought I was too old to fly. They thought I was grounded, clipped, and caged. But they forgot that I was the one who built the cage, and I was the only one who knew how to dismantle it. I took a sip of wine and watched a hawk circling high above the vineyard, riding the thermals effortlessly. I smiled. They thought I was too old to fly. I only proved that my wings are made of money and self-respect, while they never even learned how to take off. The most profound lesson here is that silence is not weakness. It is often the loudest form of strategy. Garrison Ford didn't waste energy arguing with people who had already decided he was worthless. Instead, he let their own greed become the trap that destroyed them. He proved that dignity isn't about holding on to a building or a legacy for the sake of the past, but about having the courage to tear it all down when it becomes toxic. True power lies in knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, even family, treat you as an asset to be liquidated. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of people reclaiming their power. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Garrison's shoes?